help me. The voice on the voicemail is barely human, a mix of agony, fear, and something else, something unexplainable. Then a deep, guttural growl cuts through the recording, followed by an eerie silence. A sharp noise, maybe a gunshot, maybe something else echoes through the static before the call abruptly ends. And then, nothing. When Karine McCabe played that voicemail, her hands trembled. The man screaming, that was her husband Henry, but by the time she heard it, he was already gone. Henry McCabe wasn't the kind of man you'd expect to vanish. He was no drifter, no thrill seeker with a dangerous past. He was a respected auditor, a family man, and a husband of 11 years. He had built a life of structure and responsibility, working hard to provide for his wife and children. People described him as intelligent, ambitious, and kind a man who valued security. But in the early hours of September 7th, 2015, something went terribly wrong. His wife was out of town and he had planned a casual night out with friends. Nothing unusual. But somewhere between saying goodbye and getting home, he disappeared. 2 months later, his body would be found in a lake. No signs of foul play, no clues about how he got there. And the voicemail? It's one of the most chilling pieces of evidence ever linked to a missing persons case, because it doesn't just sound like Henry was in distress. It sounds like he was being attacked by something that defies explanation. It started like any other night. On September 6th, Henry met up with his friend William Kennedy for drinks at a club in Spring Lake Park, Minnesota. He had been under stress lately, work pressures, financial concerns, but nothing out of the ordinary. A night out was supposed to be a break from all that. The two men drank, laughed, and enjoyed themselves. Witnesses later confirmed that Henry wasn't acting erratic or upset, just a man out with a friend unwinding. Sometime after midnight, the club started emptying out. It was time to go home. But instead of dropping Henry off at his house, William later told police that Henry asked to be left at a gas station. A strange request at that hour, but William said he didn't think much of it. He dropped Henry off and drove away. That was the last time anyone saw Henry McCabe alive. But when police later checked security footage from the gas station, there was no sign of him. Had William really dropped him off there? If not, where did he go? And more importantly, who or what was with him when that voicemail was recorded? Imagine it's the middle of the night. You're out drinking with a friend, and now it's time to go home. You're tired, a little buzzed, ready to collapse into bed. But instead of heading home, you ask to be dropped off at a gas station. That's exactly what William Kennedy told police Henry McCabe had done. It didn't make sense. Henry's wife Karine was out of town, so there was no reason for him to avoid going home. It was a short drive, a direct route. Why suddenly choose to be left at a random location in the dead of night? And then there was the biggest problem with William's story. Henry never showed up on the gas station's security cameras. The footage from that night was reviewed over and over. No trace of him, no sightings, no purchases. No one remembered seeing him. If he had really been dropped off there, he had somehow vanished into thin air. Or had he never been there in the first place? At 2:23 am, Karine McCabe's phone rang. It was Henry, but she was asleep. She never picked up. When she woke up the next morning, she saw the missed call and the voicemail notification. She pressed play, expecting maybe a drunk, rambling message. What she heard made her blood run cold. It wasn't words. It wasn't even a normal voicemail. Instead, it was a nightmare recorded in real time. First, moaning painful, guttural sounds like someone struggling to breathe. Then, a scream raw, terrified. A deep, growling noise followed, something so unnatural it didn't sound human. The sounds continued for nearly 2 minutes, pure agony. Then came the worst part, a sharp, violent noise, almost like a gunshot. And then silence. The call cut off. Kareen's hands shook as she replayed it over and over. What had she just listened to? By the time she heard it, her husband was already missing. And that voicemail was the last known trace of Henry McCabe alive. A voicemail is usually a simple thing, someone calling to leave a quick message, a reminder, a goodbye, a mistake. But this voicemail, this was something else. When Kareen pressed play, she expected a drunk, rambling Henry, maybe slurring his words, telling her he missed her. But what came through the speaker defied explanation. First, the sound of labored breathing as if someone was gasping for air, then groaning like someone was in unimaginable pain. Then came the screams, not just yelling, agonized, terrified screams, the kind that don't come from someone who's just hurt, they come from someone who knows they're about to die. Then something worse, a deep, guttural growl, something animalistic, something not human. The noises didn't stop. The struggle, the panic, it went on for almost 2 minutes, and then a sharp, violent sound. A gunshot, a blunt impact, something breaking. The noises stopped. Then silence. The call ended. Kareen sat there, her hands shaking. What had she just listened to? Who or what had been with Henry when that voicemail was recorded? And where was he now? Kareen's mind raced. She called Henry back immediately. No answer. She tried again and again, straight to voicemail. Something was wrong. She reached out to William Kennedy, the last person to see Henry. What happened last night? William told her the same thing he would later tell police. Henry had asked to be dropped off at a gas station. That didn't sit right with Kareen. Henry wouldn't just vanish in the middle of the night. Something happened to him. Her stomach twisted as she replayed the voicemail. Over and over. Each time it only made less sense. She had to act fast. She dialed 911. Henry McCabe was missing, and if that voicemail was any clue, he was in serious trouble. The search for Henry McCabe began immediately. Police treated it as a missing persons case at first, hoping he'd turn up somewhere. Maybe he got lost. Maybe he was drunk and wandered off. But as the hours turned into days, it became clear. Henry wasn't coming home. There were no signs of him anywhere. No trace, no leads. His phone was off, completely untraceable. His wallet and keys were gone, but not found at the gas station, not found anywhere. He hadn't taken his car. So how had he left the gas station, if he had even been there at all? Because here's the thing, there was no evidence that Henry had ever set foot in that gas station. Surveillance footage was reviewed over and over again. Not a single frame showed Henry walking in, walking out, or even near the station. It was as if, from the moment William Kennedy dropped him off, Henry ceased to exist. William Kennedy, the last person to see Henry alive, was questioned multiple times. He insisted that Henry had asked to be dropped off at the gas station. That was his story, and he stuck to it. But police had a problem. There was nothing, no footage, no receipts, no witnesses to confirm Henry was ever there. Employees working that night said they didn't see him. No one reported a man wandering the area. Had William lied? If he had, then the biggest question remained, where had Henry really gone? And even more disturbing, why was William so determined to convince everyone he had dropped Henry at that gas station? The voicemail wasn't just horrifying, it was unexplainable. When police obtained the recording from Kareen, they sent it to audio experts for analysis. They wanted to know, what exactly were they hearing? The screams were authentic, They belonged to Henry. His voice was filled with pain, terror, and desperation. But the other sounds, that's where things got even stranger. Some of the growling noises in the background didn't match anything human. They weren't just deep groans or distorted sounds from a weak phone signal. They sounded like an animal, but not one that belonged in Minnesota. Forensic analysts compared the growls to known animal sounds: bears, wolves, even large cats, but nothing matched. Some experts claimed it sounded manufactured, as if a second voice, one that wasn't Henry's, was somehow layered into the call. Had Henry been attacked by something? If so, by what? And if it wasn't an animal, then what could have possibly produced that inhuman noise? Investigators started looking deeper into Henry's life. A devoted husband, a hard-working auditor, a man with no known enemies. But was that really the case? Some investigators began to wonder, had Henry been in danger before that night? Had someone been following him? Had he been threatened? Was there something happening in his life that no one knew about? His work as an auditor meant he handled financial investigations. Had he uncovered something dangerous? If Henry was being targeted, was it a person or something else? Because there was another theory that couldn't be ignored. Maybe Henry wasn't just attacked that night. Maybe he was running from something long before he even made that call. With no leads, no answers, and only that terrifying voicemail as evidence, theories started spreading. At first, some believed it was a mugging gone wrong. Maybe Henry had been robbed and left for dead somewhere, his body yet to be found. After all, his wallet and keys were missing. But that explanation didn't match the voicemail. There were no voices demanding money, no sounds of a scuffle, no attacker yelling orders. Then there were the conspiracy whispers. Some pointed to Henry's work as an auditor, suggesting he may have uncovered something dangerous. A corporate fraud scheme, government corruption. Could he have been silenced? Then there were the darker theories. People who listened to the voicemail again and again started noticing something: the growling didn't sound human. Was Henry attacked by something not of this world? Some even suggested paranormal involvement, a supernatural force, an unknown entity, something beyond human comprehension. It sounded ridiculous, and yet nothing about Henry McCabe's disappearance made sense. And then, 2 months later, something happened that should have answered questions. Instead, it only made things stranger. On November 2nd, 2015, a body surfaced. A kayaker was paddling through Rush Lake, a murky body of water 6 miles from where Henry was last seen. Something floated in the water. It was him, Henry McCabe's body. But the condition of his remains only deepened the mystery. No gunshot wounds, no stab marks, no visible injuries at all, no signs of foul play. The medical examiner's ruling: probable drowning. But if Henry drowned, how did he get to the lake? And why did his body not show the usual signs of being in water for 2 months? His wallet and keys were still missing. No one could explain how he ended up miles away from where he was supposedly last seen. If Henry wasn't murdered and he didn't drown on his own, then what really happened to him? Henry McCabe's body was found floating in Rush Lake. But if anyone thought this discovery would bring closure, they were wrong. The medical examiner's report only made things stranger. There were no bullet wounds, no stab marks, no visible injuries, no signs of a struggle, no broken bones, no blunt force trauma. Nothing. The official ruling: probable drowning. It seemed like an easy answer, but anyone who knew Henry wasn't convinced. Henry McCabe was a strong swimmer. He wasn't the kind of person to panic in water. Even if he had somehow ended up in the lake, he should have been able to get out. And then there was the biggest question of all: how did he even get there? Rush Lake was 6 miles away from where he was last seen. He had no car. No one saw him walking. His phone was off. His keys and wallet were missing. If he drowned, how did he end up so far from where he was supposedly dropped off? And if it wasn't drowning, what really killed him? The moment Henry's body was found, another problem surfaced. The timeline didn't make sense. Henry had been missing for 2 months, but his body didn't look like it had been in water that long. Typically, a body submerged for weeks would show signs of decomposition, swelling, skin slippage, discoloration, but Henry's remains weren't as deteriorated as expected. It raised a chilling question. Had Henry even been in the lake this whole time? If not, where was he before that? And who or what put him in the water? If Henry McCabe drowned, his body should have been found with all of his belongings. But there was a major problem. His wallet and keys were missing, and they were never recovered. If he had somehow wandered into Rush Lake on his own, those items should have been somewhere nearby. They should have been found in his pockets, on the lake bed, or along the shore, but they weren't. It raised two deeply unsettling possibilities. Someone took them. Henry was never alone that night. If Henry was attacked, his killer could have taken his belongings. But that didn't make sense either. Why take his wallet and keys, but leave his body to be found? The alternative was even creepier. Had Henry been held somewhere before ending up in the lake? Was his body placed there after death, with his personal items removed to erase clues? Whatever the case, one thing was clear: Henry McCabe didn't just wander into that lake on his own. As the case dragged on with no arrests, no suspects, and no clear cause of death, some people started looking at Henry's job. Henry McCabe wasn't just anyone, he was an auditor. His work involved examining financial records, investigating potential fraud, and looking into missing money. Had he uncovered something he wasn't supposed to see? Supporters of this theory pointed to how clean the case was. No wounds, no obvious cause of death, no suspects, just a body. It felt deliberate, as if someone wanted to erase Henry McCabe without leaving evidence behind. Could he have been silenced? And if so, who was behind it? The voicemail was terrifying. The inhuman growls, the agonized screams, the sharp, sudden sound before the silence. To some, this wasn't just a crime or a tragic accident. This was something else. People who listened to the voicemail over and over heard something unnatural, something that didn't belong in this world. The growling wasn't human. Audio experts couldn't match it to any known animal either. Some speculated that Henry had encountered something beyond our understanding. Was he being hunted, lured into something he couldn't escape? The voicemail sounded like a real-time struggle with something unseen. The noises weren't random. They had a pattern, a rhythm, almost as if something was toying with him before the final moment. And then there was another strange detail. Henry was from Liberia, a country rich with folklore about spirits, demons, and supernatural forces. Some theorized that whatever happened to Henry wasn't just a crime, but something much darker. When investigators ran out of leads, they began leaning toward a simpler explanation: suicide. They suggested that Henry, stressed from financial pressures and work-related struggles, may have wandered off that night and ended his own life. But there was a problem: none of the evidence fit. If Henry had planned to take his own life, why would he have left that voicemail? Why the agonized screams? Why did he sound like he was in a violent struggle? Why the growling noises? Then there was the lake. If Henry walked into the water by choice, why was his body in near perfect condition? A drowning victim left for 2 months would show signs of decomposition and water damage, but Henry's body looked too well preserved. Had he even been in the lake that whole time? Or had his body been moved there later? If Henry hadn't ended his own life, then someone or something ended it for him. Years have passed since Henry McCabe's body was found in Rush Lake, but the mystery surrounding his death refuses to fade. No arrests, no suspects, no real answers. And yet, the biggest questions still linger. Where was Henry in the hours after his last call? His body wasn't found for 2 months, but experts believe it hadn't been in the water that long. So, where was he before that? What was happening in that voicemail? Was Henry being attacked, hunted, tortured, and by who or what? Why did the police close the case without further investigation? How could they call it a simple drowning when the circumstances were so bizarre? The case officially remains unsolved, but to those who have listened to that voicemail, to those who have followed the eerie trail of evidence, one thing is clear. Henry McCabe's death was not an accident. Even today, people still listen to that voicemail. And every time they do, they feel that overwhelming sense of dread. It doesn't sound like a man slipping into unconsciousness. It doesn't sound like a man taking his last breath in a tragic accident. It sounds like a man fighting for his life against something unimaginable. So, what really happened to Henry McCabe? Was he murdered? Was it a cover up? Or did he encounter something that defies logic? Maybe the truth is still out there waiting to be uncovered. Or maybe some mysteries were never meant to be solved.